2/3 of what I know about, or what I'm comfortable talking about, is on the slide there. It's about working in the public sector. And I'm sure, like a lot of you, I actually have become a dual, or have had and continue a dual career. So I've got my sort of the day job that pays the rent. I'll tell you about that in a second. And then alongside that, I do all sorts of other things. You've heard at least one of those roles, which I'll explain a bit about later, connected with my involvement, previous involvement in local government, local politics, where I was a councillor for 20 years in the city of Westminster. But today, I'm employed by the NHS. Anybody have a connection with the NHS through family members or direct? There we go. It's one of those things. There's 1.5 million people in the country who are employed directly by the NHS. So inevitably, it's a degree of separation of things. Great, excellent. So that just proves that point. So I am one of the directors of a national NHS organisation, NHS Resolution. And when I joined 8 years ago, we were known as the NHS Litigation Authority, which usually sent a shiver down the spine of a clinician who came knocking on the door, the man from the ministry or woman from the ministry, to investigate a case harm to a patient, usually something to a member of staff, which is what we do, and we will then investigate if the patient has suffered harm through no fault of their own. We will then seek to pay out compensation. But one of the first things I did, actually, on to legacy, I renamed the organisation, which was very interesting. I had to get our current chancellor, who was then the health secretary, Jeremy Hunt, to agree to allow us to have a new name. And Resolution says much more clearly what's inside the box. We are about resolving claims and concerns and harm much more than we are about going through the courts. In fact, only 20% of our casework ever goes through formal legal proceedings. So increasingly, litigation was a very outdated mode. So by definition, that's a bit of a legacy, isn't it? But we'll come on to other stuff in a moment. I thought I'd start today. Well, that's what I'm going to talk about. So getting all of us to think about what our own personal legacies are in the context of our leadership journeys within our organisation settings. That's really important. But I first start with a really interesting quote. Somebody who I've only recently encountered. Has anybody heard of Mary Parker Follett? Nick, I'd be amazed if you hadn't. I'd be horrified if you didn't. She's often regarded as the sort of the mother of American management thinking. And I heartily recommend just going and having a bit of a Google. She's very insightful, particularly given, here we are, a quote from the 1920s. But I think this is a wonderful quote just to frame the discussion today. I hope we are getting some good discussion around the table. She says that the skillful leader does not rely on personal force. He controls his group not by dominating, but by expressing. He stimulates what is best in us. He unifies and concentrates what we feel only gropingly and scatteringly, but he never gets in the way from the current of which we and he are both an integral part. Whoever has struck fire out of me, aroused me to action which I should not otherwise have taken. He has been my leader. And I think those are really powerful words, but that's how I view leadership. You know, it's how you're expressing your leadership through those around you. Clearly, I think that's a very potent message. And that then gets me into thinking through that leadership lens about your impact through others, which is how I very much see myself develop very professionally and in some of those wider community and social roles that I'll unpack a bit later. So I think this is where legacy really comes in. And again, another quote here from Galford and Marupa. Legacy is the enduring impact leaders have on the people they work with. It is the way that leadership lasts. It can be seen in the thoughts and the actions of the people who have worked with or for you long after your professional affiliation was ended. And again, we'll come on to later concepts in the frame of succession panel today as well. So again, quite a powerful way of just thinking about your legacy actually is evidenced by those around you. It's what you leave in the room once you've closed the door behind you. I won't read all of this, but again, worth just looking at specifically leadership legacy. And it is about how you treat those around you, as John says here. And it's allowing for a more seamless transition. He talks about passing the baton to the person that will take your place. So it's creating that space, creating that opportunity for legacy, again, within the context of moving on. Very interestingly, he does go on to talk about edifices, tangible tiles. So, you know, the Francois Mitterrand, I think, 8 grand projects, as a French president in the 1980s, one of which I'm sure many of you have seen on your trips to Paris, a wonderful glass pyramid outside the Louvre. That's one, that's you could argue that's a wonderful legacy. Might also argue it's a bit of an edifice, a bit of an ego for the said president of the Republic. So I think there's a tension here. There's a tension between the kind of above the surface aspect of legacy, the visible, tangible, extrinsic, and what lies below the surface, which is back to some of the previous writers. And without any apology here, I'm going to talk about, well, all these my edifices. I don't know. I'm just going to tell you a couple of case stories just to frame the discussion and get some thinking. So, one of the programs that I am very proud of played a relatively minor part in was the nation's switch to digital TV, which happened over a 3 to 4 year period, from around 2007 to around 2010-11. And it was very interesting. Actually, we started doing the work not too far from here at a place called Whitefield, near Sellafield. Brilliant. And the reason we chose Whitefield, with all respect to people with a is our very clever broadcast engineer people that I used to help manage and work with and learn to huge amount of physics from. Goodness. Whitehaven was at the very end of the daisy chain of television transmissions because it's on the coast overlooking the Irish Sea. So we were able to isolate Whitehaven as a bit of a pipe, the switchover, and that became a test bed. So we did risk ruining people's viewing of Coronation Street and EastEnders in Whitehaven, and thankfully it never came to that. But there was always a risk that when we switched off the analog system, there would be people whose tellies would not be capable of getting the new digital system. And my role, my specific role, is on the screen here in front of us. I was charged with working with electrical retailers and manufacturers, the likes of, at the time, something Branson O'Dell, Comet, Currys, Dixon's, John Lewis, just about hanging on today, he said, and lots of independent stores, responsible for getting some of that point of sale promotional stuff you can see through the door then, in the door, on display, in the right bit of the country at the right time. And more to the point, working with the likes of Sony, Panasonic, Sanyo, Philips, again, some of these brands are operating in the telemarket, ensuring that the stock was also in the store. So when you walked in and said, I need to buy a converter box, they had one on display. They could explain how it plumbed into your existing analog TV to convert your reception into digital. So very exciting, very exciting. Now, you know, that's a very, I've written here, that's a very extrinsic element of my own leadership legacy. But I think in the context of what I've also added there's something around delivering a legacy within a kind of social context. And obviously this was bankrolled by you the taxpayer, the license payer, largely speaking. So we didn't have to worry about the P&L side of this program. Obviously, we contained costs, not least through some of the partnership working that we did with the retailers, because they were getting obviously revenue numbers, so we're getting a margin numbers. So they funded a lot of this stuff through the negotiations that I was leading on behalf of the program. But delivering free to view, multi-channel, digital interactive TV, which people still today rely on as their main way of getting TV, by and large, I think is a huge social news. Yeah. So there's a tangible aspect of legacy in addition to the personal element. Moving on a couple of years, I then my first kind of what I call my first grown-up role was when I was appointed to the board as an exec director of a government agency in the education space. This is interesting because we were charged with putting computer technology, ICT, to call it at the time, into every single state school. That's about 35 schools, 35,000 schools in India. So it's a numbers game. This legacy was about numbers. Again, within a fairly short window, because we were operating on a government timetable, meeting policy, commitments, etc., etc. And I was the marketing comms partnerships director on this program as well. I'm very proud of this. It's actually did have a bottom line impact on the way young people in this country engage with the education process. And we had to bring the teaching community with us on the journey. We had to bring parents and the learners as well. There's lots of skepticism, lots of potential blockers and opposition to the deployment of computers in schools at a time when you were sitting with a pen and paper in front of you, you were regarded as a learner. If you're sitting with a computer screen or a tablet, you were just merely playing. Yeah, and you think of how today we're in a very different space. So this was around enriching the educational experience of hundreds, thousands of young people in the UK. So that just brings me on to just some thinking about some initial principles that I've highlighted on here, based on those two programs. Again, legacy-based principles within that context of my public sector work. So ensuring that nobody gets left behind, I think, is a key aspect of one of those points of my programs that I just highlighted on. Particularly for vulnerable people who perhaps were not particularly tech savvy. So we did a lot of work again in White England with older people's charities, disabled charities. We spent a lot of time in schools getting the young people to educate their mums and dads and their carers around what they needed to convert their telly so that they could continue to work.
And I can say this because I wasn't yet. I think it was in the 1950s till about the 1990s. Going back there, totally different mindset and different set of aspirations and everything. So it's really a fun weekend.
It was a little bit like, it was sort of like being at the end of a pier. Absolutely. I mean, you were literally facing a very sort of misty, murky Irish Sea most days, actually. And there was kind of not quite the edge of the world, but it was quite an isolated part of England, I would say, as a market. And so to bring that particular town into the 21st century, it was the first part of the UK to go fully digital. Was an amazing thing that we delivered, actually. So it was a sort of paradox there, I think. Absolutely, really, yeah. So ensuring that the communities in that example of White England don't get left behind. Just from a marketing point of view, being a marketing guy myself, making sure that your information is accessible, making sure that it's tested, people understand what the written word, what you're trying to communicate, and how you're trying to communicate it through different formats. I think the accountability piece is also interesting, and I sit on many boards nowadays. I think I can't actually lost count. I think it's 8 charity boards, and I'm just being appointed chair of social enterprise, which we might chat about later when we do the Q&A session after lunch. But being open to scrutiny, really important aspect of legacy as well, and that could be being open to scrutiny among your peers, if you sit on a management or leadership group, as I do, scrutiny by your staff as well. I've learned during the pandemic, since the pandemic, through the pandemic, one of the feedback points that I've had to adjust from my team is, Ian, just slow down, can't keep up with you. So I've really had to just, put myself from fifth down to second or third gear sometimes, just to enable those around me to adjust to what I'm thinking, what I'm articulating, what I'm aspiring to on behalf of my current organisation in the NHS. I've talked briefly about those partnerships with retailers, and again, another example, another dimension to my legacy experience is working in partnership with others to deliver your program, person or professional aspirations. And then this comes really back to us as individuals. I think I pull out this. Really, it is about making a difference. And again, there's two programs I think illustrate how I have been part of making a difference since I graduated from here in 2002. But this is the reason I pull this quote out. It talks about assuming courage within the context of legacy. And sometimes you do have to stick your neck out if you wish to leave a legacy, particularly a social legacy, which I'm going to come on to in a moment, quite a personal social legacy as well. So here I am in my Merrill splendor. This photo will take a moment just to, you can get over the shock of the weight of that gown. I can tell you it was exceedingly heavy, and that is real gold braid on the sleeves. And I'm standing next, some of you will recognise, he's just been re-elected, Mayor and Sally Carr. Stephen's next to his wife, and I'm next to my husband, Christopher. You'll see, Christopher was wearing a national modest badge around his neck, but we were the first same-sex couple publicly to be the Lord Mayor and Consort, as we termed him, of the City of Westminster. And going into that role, it's a 12-month term, non-repeatable, non-refundable. Nobody ever gets re-elected to do this, in other words. And it's a tremendous and life-enhancing and life-changing 12 months of Ireland. So this was in civic year 2017 to 18. It's about 5-6 years in there. And this, as you might or might not be able to pick out, but this was London Pride in July 2017, and I was invited to join me with this study to lead that parade with Christopher and other colleagues and friends with me, in front of 1.5 million people lined on the streets of the West End of the capital. It was quite a moment. But of course, that was just it happened to be near the beginning of my 12-month term. So I was able to use that quite consciously to start to promote social harmony, social inclusion, quite publicly as well. Not without risk. I mean, I had support from the council, great press officers, stuff that I was doing in the media, and I'll show you a bit about that in a moment. So it was all curated, and again, thanks to the Martin Comstock as well myself, I was able to kind of manage and program some of that in throughout the year. But I think it really helped to kind of levitate, and back to the legacy point, levitate how the civic authority of Westminster and how the role of the Lord Mayor of Westminster is now still today regarded. Previously, to be candid, and I know the recording, so I watch my words, but it was regarded as a bit of a fusty, old-fashioned thing to do. And I was the first Lord Mayor to ditch the tail when I'm getting and hand out prizes at a kids' school and all that stuff. I wanted to wear the blue gold gown. There was one occasion when I went to a school prize giving, and this little boy turned around, and literally the first thing he said to me, spontaneously, having seen me dressed in that garb, was, "Oh, are you the king?" You can't buy moments like that. Wonderful. So this was a conscious effort over my year, and I've continued to lean into this equality space ever since. And I just did pick out this quote within the context from J. Patrick Dolan, talking about personal integrity, moral commitments, legal authority, accountability, effectiveness. All of those words, I think, chime with my direct experience during my year as the civic leader of that city, which is what that role was about. Or a startup, whatever. The eyeballs are on you. The expectation is going to be pretty high. So again, I think this is really capturing, my legacy doesn't capture all aspects of managerial leadership. It maps a rich, broad understanding of leadership and responsibility linked to trusteeship. And again, that's back to that piece earlier around what happens when you leave the room. What's rooted within the organisation, those people that you're working with. So this is an example of stuff that we did. Again, deliberately, we could have used any number of images. We chose that one. I sanctioned that. Following interview in the London Standard, the day before that parade photo was taken. Again, just to start to use some of the channels that I had available. And this is about my privilege as a leader. To be very open with you, it was a privilege to have access to some of these media channels, but deliberately, sticking your neck out, so to speak, for something you care about, you're passionate about, and that's important to you. And not only important to you, but again, the wider community, not just the community, but wider community. So just a few final reflections, and we will get into hopefully some questions and answers from you today as well. I've just put out, I guess, 3 key areas, and there's a 4th one as well, but something about self-reflection and why I think that's important with the context of thinking about your legacy. So values, really critical. And again, regardless of whether you're working in the commercial sector, the public sector, or the third sector, but I think values and your leadership values, how do you define them? How do you define them? And do you, back to that sort of piece, do you give yourself enough space to truly reflect what those values are? And then the point about relationships, back to the point that I've emphasized a lot today, that being a leader is not an isolated role. Your success is predicated on what you do with and through others. So just briefly on each of those 3 themes. First of all, on the self-reflection aspect, as I say, take time, think where you are on that journey. And it's not a linear journey. We'll all have setbacks in our leadership roles, things that we aspire to do that don't, things that we wish to see being perfectly delivered, being less perfectly formed in reality. So think about the challenges, think about the decisions, think about your setbacks and how how that has also shaped you as a leader. And that gets us onto the values piece that I mentioned, identifying the core values, your core values that guide your leadership approach. I've talked recently about how during the pandemic I've had to be much more attuned to embracing through remote technology, reading the room, giving space, giving time to those around me, really important. Ensuring that it is in my mind, a level playing field when those hands go up on the screen, people want to be part of that conversation, regardless of rank, role, number, really critical. I think also that gets into that authentic space as well. And on the relationships, well, clearly leadership is not at all solitary. Even those of you who might be single person entrepreneurs, your success will absolutely be based on your investors, those around you who are coaching, mentoring you, and more particularly those that are buying paying for your services, I hope. So cultivating meaningful relationships, really critical. And see that as a resource, as an asset that is absolutely to be invested in. And that is predicated on fostering trust, collaboration, based on open communication. And the last point, which is kind of what I started out with, really knowing when to hand over the stick, the baton, whether it's a relay race or this or whatever other metaphor you wish to think about. I mean, clearly there will be some people, you often see this in politics, don't you? Politics is probably the only profession that, by and large, you are destined to fail in your role if you stay on too long by being booted out of office. For the record, I chose not to stand in the 2022 election. I've had 20 years on the council, so I thought, time to move on, make some space, and I did. It's a very conscious decision, and it's the right thing to do. But also, there's different touch points here around mentoring, cross-training, delegating, planning for the future. And that, I think, should be your day-to-day activities as leaders should be very much focused through this lens of investing in the future. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I just want to return to where we began with Mary Parker Follett, just with a closing quote. It says, "The person who influences me most is not he who does great deeds, but he who makes me feel I can do great deeds." And again, I think that's such a wonderful way to frame hopefully the conversation that we're going to have over questions around your legacy in your leadership. Thank you. So we've got the mic. I'm conscious this is being recorded, so we'll have to use the mic to take questions. So questions or thoughts or comments or challenges? You'd like to just chip in first? Go ahead.
It's really great that I might get mine for a while. And I don't know how many of you can actually resonate with me. But on your slides, you mentioned 3 aspects. You said have self-reflection, nurture your relationships, and know your core values. My dilemma these days is I constantly feel I'm on a treadmill, and all the 3 areas you mentioned requires time. I feel every day I'm doing so much, and I don't have enough time for reflection, for nurturing my relationships, and digesting what is happening. And I don't think it's just like my career or my role. I think it's a global issue. I think the notion of time and not having enough time to digest really and take the message out of the day is a huge challenge for me. Yeah, because that's a huge part of learning, I would say, for me, that I can make sense of things, better understand myself, come on with the shopping. Yeah, so especially how do you do it? Do you have like any set aside time?
Well, that's a great personal challenge. Thank you for sharing that with us. And you were getting nods around the room, and I'm saying that because obviously people watching this online can't see the sitting right here at the table. Just before I respond to that, does that chime with some others in the room? Yeah, it does. I mean, it's interesting. And I agree and totally recognise what you say. There is an adage, isn't there, that if you want something to, you ask a busy person, and oftentimes we'll find in our business life or personal life, social life, whatever, getting drawn in, being asked to do more and more and more because you're good at it, and people, they say that, she's really good at what she does, so we'll ask her to do even more. And I see that happening in professional domains. But I guess practically, you've only got so much time in the day. You've only got so much time in the week. And again, I think one needs to be quite mindful around boundaries and protecting, some of your time as well. Something that I do very often in my own working week to manage some of what I've been talking about today. It's actually to diarise some of that time, to block out some of that time. Now, it might be easier in an office-based environment. I don't know your day-to-day working situation. We all have, we all have very different points to make on this, but actually to practically say, actually, that's a moment for reading, a moment for deep reflection, a moment actually to pick up a phone or have a Zoom with a trusted colleague or friend or mentor or someone that you want to run something by as well. So have a think about that. And it doesn't work for everyone. People perhaps have a more kind of fluid working week because of how they operate and the stresses that come with that. But I'd encourage you to, again, see all these points as a resource and as a necessary point of being the leader that you are, and don't underinvest in yourself at leadership lens. Thank you. Really good point. Any other points down this end?
So this is very nice to meet you, John. Thank you for the presentation. To dig a bit deeper into this topic, okay? So that means if you don't have enough time, and I think we know this time management technologies, you have to decide what you weigh, and that means you also have to make sacrifices. So how do you make these sacrifices in the context of the principles that you mentioned in the right way? Because on the one hand side, we need to be effective and efficient, and we learn all of that in business. But many of those topics have to do with leadership legacy. What do you think?
Yeah, again, another great question. Thank you. And there is a tension, isn't there? I mean, just through my own experience, as I said, as well as working, being employed by the NHS, being quite a senior role today, I do sit on a number of charity boards, and I've just taken on the chair of social enterprise as well. So that's in a way of sort of countering your question in ways of, again, countering the question there about taking on a lot, and I do take on a lot. But again, I only take on stuff that is getting back to the values, worth me investing my time and energy and emotionally capital. Yeah, some of the stuff just take a lot out of you. And B, again, it's not just you investing your time, you're it's part of an ecosystem. But then I'd also, be mindful of triggers, personal stressors. I don't know whether any of you are familiar with, there's a psychometric, quite a well regarded psychometric test with Hogan. Anyone familiar with Hogan? Yeah, he's one of us. Yeah, so well, just having a look on Google about Hogan, because through that I'm very, very attuned to my stressors, my red zones, my hot spots, and things that if I don't manage my, the whole of my leadership traits well, I spill over, e.g. running too fast, people not being able to keep up, metaphorically speaking, is one. My more mischievous character trait comes out, and I need to watch that sometimes. I'm in a particular setting. Human can have great currency, but also it could absolutely, if you step too far, doesn't always translate, is what I'm saying as well. So I know I haven't answered your question directly, it's a tough question you've asked, but I'm just giving you, some additional insights. And I'd encourage you, I have no commercial say in Hogan, it's a commercial firm, but the test, but I don't have a look at something that gives you a view about your triggers, your red zones, and it's a great sort of dashboard just to be mindful of when you are under stress or you haven't got time to reflect, and it's just a great way to bring things back to the initially same thing. We've probably got time for just one more question or comment and observation.
But I'll just add to that, we did a psychometric at the University of Bradford. We've done various leadership ones. And I get involved in anything and everything, you know, and oh, we'll do this, we'll do that. And I sat around at the team and went around personalities. And when they read mine, they said, yeah, will you stop volunteering all of us to do things? Just because you want to do them doesn't mean we want to do them. And can we have more discussion about that? And that, I mean, when I read it, it was obvious, but I didn't thought that it's not, it's in the doing it, yeah, you know. And it was sometimes demoralised the rest of them. But one of the biggest things, and I had this conversation, and it took me till I was 50, was to say no to doing things, particularly here, to say, I don't want to be involved in that. Because there's so much about, oh, you're not being a team there. And that's kind of blackmail, to use the word, I think, being put on you. Oh, well, you'll get involved in this. Your team will do this. And while we sort of take it as, oh, badge of honour, it's not sometimes. We need to say no. And I think that was one of the things that over the years I've learned to do.
I don't think it's much of not being able to manage our time, not having boundaries, not being assertive. I think I'm quite good at those skills. I think it's the nature of the business these days, and this bombarded, I think, the amount of tasks that doesn't leave so much room for reflection. It's just I constantly feel you're on the treadmill and delivering without really digesting what's happening. Because I think it's important to have a period of time to mind and balance and reflect what is really happening, so that we can actually come on with, insightful, experiences. I would think that you have shared that. I don't know, maybe it's just my feeling, but that's, I don't know, but that's how I feel really. And, yeah.
Well, let me just, first of all, thank you for being very polite and for listening to my self-indulgent thoughts the last 40 odd minutes, but particularly to the questions towards the end. I mean, I think, like you, I started to learn to say no. It's not just, it's back to the impact on those around you, which is what I was doing. And great that you're sharing your ongoing, challenges around being self-reflective. I think the fact that you're raising that is probably half the journey. It really is. Yeah. All right. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you.